Hey, you wanna know how old you really are? The last Burnout game to be released in this franchise was back in 2008. 2008. Apart from the Burnout Paradise remastered in 2018, we have not had a brand new Burnout game in damn near almost 2 decades, bro. Let that sink in. In a giant market filled with arcade racing titles, like Forza, Horizon 5, Need for Speed Unbound, The Crew 2 Motorfest, all these games, bro, and we have yet to get a brand new iteration of Burnout. It's kind of sad too, because like EA only makes Need for Speed, right? They haven't made anything else. And honestly, I think it's time they bring back Burnout. I think it's time for a revival. As many as you guys know, I grew up on the PS2 era. If you guys have watched my previous videos, you guys know how much I love old school gaming and old racing games such as Need for Speed, Most Wanted, and all that, which I will make a video on if you guys want to see that in the next couple days, so keep an eye out for that. Apart from Need for Speed and Midnight Club and all those games, Burnout was probably my most played games. Burnout was just one of my favorite franchises growing up. I played Burnout 1, played Burnout 2, played Burnout 3. I couldn't play Burnout 3 as often as I wanted to because for some reason every time I played it, my disc was so scratched up. Every time I try to do a race, it just freezes for a good, I don't even know how long, 5-10 minutes. So I basically couldn't play Burnout 3 as much as I want to, but I played a lot of Burnout 2, and I played a lot of Burnout Revenge, and I'll have to say Burnout Revenge is probably my all-time favorite in the franchise. It didn't matter whether it was Burnout 1, Burnout 2, or Burnout Revenge or whatever. I knew every time I played this franchise I was gonna have a good time. When it came to Burnout, Criterion was so innovative with each entry. Starting from Burnout 1 back in 2001, that game was very, very, very bare bones, right? Not a lot of tracks, not a lot of races, not a lot of content. Fast forward to 2002, they make Burnout 2 Point of Impact. That game took everything from Burnout 1 and iterated on it. It made it better. There was better tracks, better racing, better content. They even added Crash Mode, which became a future staple in every Burnout game. Up until Burnout Paradise. I don't know why the hell they got rid of it in Burnout Paradise. Fast forward again, 2004, Burnout 3 Takedown releases. It takes Burnout 2's iteration and makes it even better. A better crash mode, better racing, better mechanics, brand new mechanics. They added a crash breaker mechanic where it allows you to control your wreck in the air and hit somebody else mid-race and get a revenge takedown. Hence the name Burnout 3 Takedown. And then fast forward to Burnout Revenge. Burnout Revenge was just absolutely insane. You could ram into other cars, and you can also use those said cars to basically take down other opponents with that car. It was pretty insane. They took that crash breaker mechanic and made it better. They added a brand new mechanic, the revenge meter. If you got taken down or if you wrecked, you could sacrifice your boost gauge and blow up, and if you got anybody within that radius, you got a revenge takedown. But if you didn't get anybody, you sacrifice your entire boost gauge, or you lose your boost entirely. They were strategic with that mechanic. Nothing was more euphoric back then was when you got taken out by somebody, right? And then the millisecond you hit your revenge meter and you blow up everybody in the race and you got a frenzy. That was so satisfying. Not to mention too, the crash mode in that game was just way better. They took that same mechanic from Burnout 3 and made it better. You can do it multiple times in a row if you can rack up the points to get it. Burnout Revenge was just probably the absolute peak of the franchise. And then not to mention Burnout Paradise. Burnout Paradise was very innovative at the time, back in 2008. This was the very first ever Burnout game to go from a closed track to an open world, and it nailed it pretty good. Of course, Burnout Paradise has its own flaws, right? It got really repetitive really fast. The licensing was a little bit more tedious opposed to the last Burnout games. They kind of made that better with the fact that every time you got a new license, you reset all your events, but at the same time, it kind of leads to a point where you're doing the same 20-30 races every time. That was kind of one of my gripes with the game at the time, was that it got pretty repetitive really fast. I think if EA was to sit down and actually just fully revive the franchise, I think that'd be a nice change of pace for the racing game genre, to be honest with you, because there's been a rise of arcade racing games in the last couple of years. People are enjoying Tokyo Extreme Racer. I'm glad people are enjoying that franchise. I've always thought that Tokyo Extreme Racer was a very underrated franchise. I think it's safe to say that everybody's tired of the open world aspect of racing games, right? After a while, it gets kind of tedious. It gets kind of boring. Especially if you play these games for years and years, like Forza Horizon, for example. You get bored pretty fast, and there seems to be no sense of progression in these games, because you race 2 things, and then next you have a Lambo after like your third race, you know, that's a whole separate video about Forza. But you know, same thing with like the crew and all that, right? Me personally, I think if EA was to revive Burnout, I think it would be a better bet if they were to just say, screw the open world aspect, we're gonna go back to closed track racing, select few locations, and we're gonna take the same mechanics from Burnout Revenge or Burnout Legends, and then add on top of that and make it just an overall fun, addicting game. I think it would sell really well in today's market, especially with a lot of these TikTok kids, bro. There's a lot of franchises that's been laid dormant for almost 2 decades, and it's just like, dude, now is the perfect time to just take these risks and just say, fuck it, bring back, let's just revive Burnout, you know, let's just see how it does. You know, maybe people might actually be interested in Burnout again, because, you know, the children yearn for an authentic arcade racing experience, and I don't think any other game besides Burnout can capture that. It's right there, you know, we are yearning for this. EA, please, bro. Please, please, please give me a new Burnout game. You know, honestly, I feel like it could come into fruition if we actually start asking like we did with Skate 4, you know, because I don't know if you guys remember, every time EA posted anything regarding, it doesn't matter what it was, bro, everybody would spam their Instagram comments, Twitter, just saying, we want Skate 4, where's Skate 4? We want Skate 4, until they said, okay, fine, we're making a new Skate game. You know, I feel like we can do that with Burnout. Anyway, I've yapped on for long enough, and it's like the 4th time me trying to record this, and it's like 4 in the morning. So like and subscribe. Thank you guys so much for supporting my channel. I know this is kind of a yap fest, I apologize for that, but you know, I'd rather sit here and try to get used to talking off the dome opposed to sitting down and just writing scripts every day. Of course, just bear with me with that, as I'm still kind of new to commentary. But anyway, hope you guys have a good day. My name's Yex. Be sure to follow me on my socials. Follow me on my Instagram at justyex. Follow me on my Twitter at itsyex. Subscribe to my second channel. That's where I post actual content, you know, other stuff besides commentary videos. I post gaming videos on there, so I'm gonna try and get some more videos out. I've been behind on so many videos. Just between this channel and my second channel, I've just been behind on videos, so apologies for that. And yeah, I hope you guys have a good day, and I'll see you guys later. See ya.